Welcome back to another Sports Next Door podcast. Today is Friday, February 12th. My name is Owen, and I am joined, as I always am, by my virtual neighbor, Max. How's it going, my friend?
Pretty well. Something about Fridays have you off, though. I think this is the 13th.
Is it really? No, it's the 12th.
No.
Don't come for me. It's the 12th.
Man, I put a timestamp in the corner of the beginning, so if you're wrong, it's going to be right on video.
All right, let's go. I'm 100% confident.
All right, we won't check. We'll just run with it. Sports Next Door are coming with a new segment, Sports Center Next Door, coming to you live right minutes after one of the most impressive wins of Novak Djokovic's career. I want to jump right into it because this match finished not 10 minutes ago and I caught pretty much the whole fifth set and it was amazing. I don't know if you were scrolling on anything.
I literally just been in the process of waking up. I didn't catch that.
Man, something about these 8:30 podcasts, I think, have reverted my sleep schedule. I've been waking up before like 8 every morning now. So this morning, like plenty, I woke up. I was kind of waiting to get started and just killing time. And I was checking out what was going on in the Australian Open because we want to talk about our Canadians, among others. And I realized that the Djokovic game was still on. Being the best player in the world, obviously wanted to catch that. I threw it on and I saw Djokovic had won the first two sets, but they were pretty close, and then dropped the second two, or I caught just the end of the fourth, which he dropped. And something didn't look right as soon as they jumped into the fifth set. He was just moving a little funny. And it turned out he'd got injured like right around the start of the third set, and he just like he couldn't return the serves, and he's playing Taylor Fritz, who had a fantastic serve. He had 24 aces throughout the match, and the fifth set started 2-2, Djokovic injured, and he gets his first serve, or gets his first set through the serve, but Fritz comes out and just blasts him with the serve, and it's not looking good for him. I think it goes to 2-2, and just Fritz has all the momentum, and then Djokovic came out and just started blasting, like just nothing scarier than an injured corner animal, and he just went all in on so many shots. Like, if I'm going down swinging, and just kicked it into a higher gear. He took it 3-2, starting to like put together a really impressive service game, even on the second serves. And then he broke Fritz's serve in the, I guess, sixth set. So he took it 4-2, and just, it was such an incredible, there was no crowd. I think Australia's jumped into a bit of a lockdown again, but the change in the air was so palpable. It was so amazing to watch. He made it 30-30 while he was up 3-2, and it just switched, and Fritz was doing his best, but you saw the benefits of being at the top for so long, because all the pressure was on Djokovic. It looked like he was going to drop it. He was trying to find a way to turn it around, and suddenly he was just ahead. He was making the better shots. It was Fritz who was in a corner, and the unforced errors started to pile up a little. Djokovic broke him with just some fantastic shot making, mixing up the drops, the forehands, placing it beautifully in the corner, and then he just ran with it and ended up breaking Fritz's serve again to take it 6-2. I think I just got to witness one of the like most impressive tennis performances of Djokovic's career, and I'm so happy I got to see that. It was fantastic to watch. Very inspirational.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the love that people have for Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, uh, how they've been so sustainably at the top of tennis forever, but like Djokovic has had perhaps an even more dominant run in the last decade. Just really, really cool that we've had like three of the top, I don't know, five guys of all time playing right now in the same era, and we're getting to witness this greatness.
Yeah,
There's something to be said about, I guess, the adrenaline that goes on when you're in that fifth set. He definitely is a guy who's got great endurance and has played in a lot of long matches before. But yeah, there's probably some veteran presence that comes in late in that fifth set.
Yeah, it was so crazy to be watching, and you felt the momentum swing, because when that set started, it felt like it was kind of over for Djokovic. Just it Fritz was serving so well. It was like, and Djokovic was just kind of scraping through on his service sets. It just felt like a matter of time before Fritz broke him, which I think was what happened in the earlier two. And then just the mental willpower to stay in it. He had some crazy returns just on Fritz's first serve a couple times, and the shot placement. And then in tennis, if you're not winning, or in any two-man sport really, if you're not winning, you're losing, right? So as soon as he starts winning, Fritz starts losing, the shoe's on the other foot, and you just see, Fritz played amazing, don't get me wrong. He had some excellent aces even at the end there, but just a couple more chokes, and it was so incredible to watch him hang in it. And yeah, like you said, I think Djokovic just started his career a bit later than Nadal and Federer, so he'll go on a bit later than them. And when all's said and done, we'll look at those three and just Djokovic slightly more forward timeline. But I can't wait. Well, I'm actually in no rush for their careers to end. When it's all said and done, we'll take a look back. But for now, no rush. Keep playing like that. And if you can win games like that injured, then let's see how long you can go.
Definitely.
So with that win, he's scheduled to face Milos Raonic, the Canadian, who moved on through the third round earlier, somewhere in our sleep cycle. But Djokovic is, he did say in the post-game interview, he thinks it's a tear. So maybe this is where his Australian Open ends, which, if you're a Raonic fan, is probably good news, because Djokovic has an excellent record against Raonic. But I may be a little unpatriotic for saying this, but it doesn't feel like we lose either way.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we had another one of those situations earlier, which again I wasn't able to catch, and the highlights aren't quite out yet, but coming at you live. I tried to learn how to pronounce this properly. I still have not quite gotten it, and I spent 4 years in Quebec. But Felix Auger-Alissime, yeah, that sounds a little too Arabic, eh? Alissime?
It sounds good
Yeah,
to me.
Alissime. Went up against Denis Shapovalov, the two hottest Canadian prospects, and Felix takes it in straight sets. I'm pretty sad I didn't get to catch that one, but there was no way I was waking up at 3 a.m. for it.
So about 5 minutes before I hopped on, I was able to catch the very condensed version of the highlights for this match. Felix ended up he's about 1 year behind in his development from Shapo, as Shapovalov stepped onto the scene just a little bit earlier and had such a great run as soon as he came up, because both of them were just so dominant on the junior circuit. And in their previous matches, and Felix has, I don't know, he has a little bit of hesitancy once he reaches a bigger stage. Every time he's played Shapovalov in the past, he's been a little bit hesitant. You can tell he's deferential a little bit in those matches, and he's made it now to a couple finals of some of the minor tournaments, and even in those finals, he's looked a little bit shy from the spotlight. But what I saw from those highlights, it looked like he had an incredibly strong mindset going into this match, because he was matching Shapo shot for shot, and Denis is a hard hitter, and Felix was all over the place. He had this one point where it was for a break, and Shapovalov had him on the run, hit it way across court, and Felix had to stretch out and reach, and he was still able to get full power on his fully extended forehand and hit the line for the break and the game. It was an incredible shot, and he turned around and he fist pumped 3 times, and he hyped up the crowd. You could just tell he was locked in, and so great to see from the kid. I think they were both seeded 11 and 20th in the tournament, so they there are high expectations on the both of them, and it sucks that they had to meet here. But I think this is a big moment for Felix. I think he's been on a bit of a roll to start the season. So I don't know what he did in the offseason. I don't know if he did any mental training, but it looks like he's locked in and ready to make a deep run here at the Aussie Open.
Yeah, I did catch most of Felix's second round game against Duckworth, and I saw him make almost that exact same shot you described, just on the ropes, but he's just so dang athletic that he manages to get no ball is out of play for him. And like, you hate those situations in tennis where you get your opponent on the ropes and then they just, something about that shot has like sets them up with a perfect angle to put it away. It's like one of the most frustrating feelings in the game. Speaking of frustration in tennis, let me ask you if this sounds familiar. Two players going up against each other, one looking for power shots, trying to like spank their serve in, the other one just returning absolutely everything the one throws at them. And then the unforced errors start to pile up as the frustration builds and the power shots just won't go in. And when they do go in, they just get returned. Does this sound familiar at all to you?
I, I could be wrong, but it kind of sounds like me and you playing over at the old tennis courts.
Oh, well, I was talking about Bianca and Andreescu going up against I shout way something.
So you're Bianca in this scenario?
Yes.
Oh, nice. It's pretty good
Well,
comp.
not when you lose like that, which I'm very familiar with, and Bianca got a taste of. Her second round exit, disappointing to see. I pretty much just described the game right there. She wasn't able to get the versatility going in her game, and she had to really rely on the power shots. And her opponent, whose name I really should have written down, was just a bend and not break. Like, very few of Bianca's shots put her out, and most of the extended rallies she was able to hang in there and just return, and make Bianca make a mistake. You saw the pressure building on Bianca. I thought it was somewhat significant that she exited the match dropping back-to-back double faults. So disappointing, but I think it just speaks to the importance of keeping your feet wet at all times. And as we see Bianca continue to play opens and matches, her game will get back to that level that we were so happy to see it at when she won that first Grand Slam.
Definitely. Before we get into the last of the women's section, I do want to touch briefly on the last men's matchup that wrapped up about an hour ago. We have Dominic Thiem with a huge comeback over the hometown player, I guess. I don't know how much they like him in Australia. He's a bit of a wild card, Nick Kyrgios, and always a lot of motion from him. Always a lot of weird gifts whenever he's playing, and there's going to be drama, yelling at the umpire when he moved through in the second round. But TM down 2-0, big comeback rally to win 3-2 and finished it off with an absolute beautiful backhand down the line. Yeah, so just shout out to TM because he's one of these like group of younger players that are slowly rising up along with Shapovalov, along with Felix, moving up and starting to challenge Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic up at the top there. So yeah, just another bright young tennis star that's making his name coming up through the men's side.
Yeah, seeded 3, so might even argue he's there already. Yeah, and then I don't have a lot to add to finish on the women's. Naomi Osaka is probably the favorite to win the tournament, continues to cruise, having won her 17th straight. Some nice camera moments with that butterfly landing on her, little symbolic maybe.
And who knows, maybe we'll see a Osaka Williams matchup because Serena Williams, I don't even know what season this is for her. It's like her, and it feels like you could compare her to a LeBron, to a Tom Brady, to I guess a Roger Federer on the men's side. She's been around for so long and continues to just mow down people in tournaments. I think she's got 57 trophies or someone on the WTA tour, like just pure dominance. And definitely when you're bringing up that GOAT conversation, which has been brought up quite a few times this week after the Super Bowl, Serena Williams has got to be there because
Yes.
she is one of the all-time greats.
No, the women's tennis greatest of all time, without
Yeah.
a doubt. Yeah, it is fascinating to see. I mean, we kind of talked about this about the Super Bowl last time. You have some players like Brady, whose game just translates so well over time, whereas players like Mahomes, who like they kind of need the peak and prime of their athleticism to be so good. And so switching that to the tennis, that's what's been so impressive about Federer and Nadal, the shot making longevity. And if you'd asked, like, is Serena going to be in the like which of those camps is Serena going to fall in 10 years ago, you'd have said like the when she ages, it's not going to translate well because the power is such an important part of her game and the athleticism. But I mean, she's just scratched the finals of so many Grand Slams in the past couple of years. It would be a fascinating, I mean, a crazy. I don't want to say cap it off, because if she goes and wins a Grand Slam, then why can't she go and continue to do that? But if she can get one more, it would be monumental.
Yeah, for her, it's just she's been around for so long that she's seen every situation, and she's such a smart player as well that even if she's losing half a step and losing half an extra, I don't know, Newton meter of force, she's able to compensate for that by just playing angles a little bit better and understanding the tendencies of her opponent. So yeah, she's just incredible to watch. Gonna be fun looking forward to see how the rest of the Aussie Open goes forward. There's gonna be no fans after I think they had an outbreak in a hotel. Someone either returning from traveling. I don't know the full story, but they've removed all fans for 5-day isolation lockdown period in Australia, and then maybe we'll have fans back for the elimination bracket semis finals. That'd be nice to see because it's been a while since we watched a sporting event with a large enough amount of fans where you can actually feel their impact, because we've had some fans in the stands, NFL, NBA, but they still have to play the crowd over top, which I know we both don't like. So it'll be, hopefully we'll get to hear like authentic crowd noise at some of these tennis matches as we get to the finals.
And we're not talking about fuck yous to Rafael Nadal when we say that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Yeah, I'm excited to keep covering this and keep watching it. I haven't really watched tennis in quite a while, actually, but I think we played a ton of matches over the summer, and that kind of rekindled some interest for me. And yeah, it's been really fun so far, and hoping to see Felix take it deep.
Absolutely. So we'll have Combat Corner when we come back from this break, and also some NBA and some NHL storylines coming up on today's pod. And we're back. I've been getting a lot of ads for this while I've been watching basketball games. It looks like it's going to be a pretty exciting weekend in the combat world. Max, why don't you preview the UFC and Bellator events coming up this weekend?
Yeah, we'll get to the Bellator event after. But first, UFC 258 this weekend. It's by far the best card the UFC has put on in my recent memory. I'm really excited for this card. It is honestly fantastic top to bottom, and I had such a annoying time writing my breakdown for this one because I had to cross out like 3 fights I otherwise would have loved to talk about, because these segments drag on too long already, and I want to talk about a little Bellator. So I'm really excited for this card. I'm going to be tuning in right from the first event all the way to the end. We'll get to the first fight on the card later, but as usual, we're going to kick off with the main event, where Kamaru Usman is going to defend the welterweight title against Gilbert Burns. So the backstory, or the overarching theme kind of behind this fight, is that these are two former training partners who were at the same gym for a long time and helped each other in their runs. I'll get to that later, but let's start by talking about the game of Kamaru Usman. I think it's incredibly simple to break down. I see it as a pyramid. So you've got 2 points at the base of that pyramid setting the foundation, his strength and his cardio. And what that foundation lets him do is put on relentless, insane pressure. So what does that translate to in the cage? It means everyone he fights, he just walks them forward. He gets their back near the cage. He grabs a hold of them and he does not let go. He stays very busy, or just busy enough, however you like it, on the cage with his foot stomps, his digs to the rib, where the rounds just whittle away and he stacks them up. It's a very risk-averse fighting style where every position he puts himself in is one where he is winning the rounds and not in any threat of getting stopped or hurt or really even having the position reversed. You've seen him do this against Jorge Masvidal. You've seen him do this against Tyron Woodley. You've seen him do this against Rafael dos Anjos. There's a couple exceptions in there where he hasn't done that, where he's chosen to strike, those being Colby Covington and Damian Maia, and I think those also speak to the risk-averse nature. So I'm trying to be very careful with my words, but the underlying tone would be, it's a boring fighting style. The one fight he's put on that was not boring was the one against Colby Covington, but I think that one does still strengthen my case that he's an incredibly risk-averse fighter, because essentially what he did against Covington was say, I'm just going to go punch for punch with this guy. And that doesn't sound risk-averse at first, but then when you think about Covington's last fight against Robbie Lawler, where he landed 500 strikes and never really had Lawler injured, even though it was an incredible performance, saying, okay, I'll go punch for punch with this pillow-fisted guy is why I think of it as a risk-averse performance. So the other really interesting part or fight he's had that he didn't use his grappling, his cage stalling, his takedowns was Damian Maia, who is, I think, by far the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner in mixed martial arts. That is where we get to Gilbert Burns and what makes this fight interesting, because Gilbert Burns, while probably not at Damian Maia's level, is a very high-level black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. He has the ability to submit off his back if you make a mistake. Which begs the question, is Kamaru Usman going to treat him like he treated Damian Maia, or is he going to do his usual thing? If the other difference, though, between Damian Maia and Gilbert Burns is Gilbert Burns has knockout power. In fact, he knocked out Damian Maia, which a lot of people beat Damian Maia on the feet. Not a lot of people knock him out. I mean, he's been in there with some killers. Tyron Woodley, Lyman Good has crazy knockout power. Kamaru Usman has some power if he lands square, and none of them were able to put Maia away, but Gilbert Burns was. So that speaks to the power and striking of Gilbert Burns. We saw it again when he sat Tyron Woodley down right in the first round, which kind of set the tone of the fight that he dictated. So stylistically, it is, if you're going to ask for two things to challenge Usman's game, it would be jiu-jitsu that makes him hesitant about grappling and knockout power that keeps him on his toes in the striking. So I think the place that Usman wins this fight is the place he wins all of his fights, with his opponent against the cage. Just doing the same thing he always does, back them up with the pressure. He's so strong that if you worry too much about the grappling, he's gonna throw hands and you really don't want him landing on you. It has been fascinating to watch the striking develop. The body shots won him the Covington fight, in my opinion. He landed a couple nice ones on Masvidal, having switched his camp to work with Trevor Whitman, one of the best minds in the game. You've got to think the more time he spends there, just the more well-rounded, technical, intelligent his game is going to get. So I'm expecting Usman to come out with his usual pressure, show some tricky, interesting striking, but simple game, get Burns' back against the fence, hold him there, toe stomp, rib punch his way to victory, because he doesn't get tired. It's everyone calls it the most exhausting part of the game, the clinch work. Like when you hold a guy there, you have to keep your muscles so taut and flexed the whole time, which just like sends the blood through them and gases so quickly, let alone like doing that while throwing like 30 nonstop punches to the ribs. Because if you don't do that, the ref will separate you. And Usman has just kind of mastered staying busy enough on the cage to keep the ref from separating and just letting the rounds whittle away. And it's a slow acting poison where in one round, you don't want to burn all your energy getting away from that. But if you don't make your move sooner or later, you're going to be down 3 rounds and then it's like shit. So I'm going to look, what I always look for when people are fighting Usman is the footwork. Can they find a way to neutralize that relentless pressure by circling and keeping it in the middle of the octagon? Because his open mat takedown game is not the same as the clinch game and the ability to get takedowns off the clinch when people get too preoccupied with breaking away. I'm going to be looking for what Usman does if it does go to the mat. I mean, Masvidal was able to have some nice get-ups. He was willing to grapple with Rafael dos Anjos, who I think is the most similar fighter on his record to Burns. Burns and Usman knowing each other will make the grappling exchanges that much more interesting because they'll be able to think 1, 2, 3 chess moves in advance. Okay, I know what he likes to do from this position. If Usman does get to the ground, is he going to look to get off some ground and pound? That if the jiu-jitsu fighter is thinking leg lock, thinking sweep, thinking scramble, sometimes you can catch them in an open position and everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Or is it going to be more a la the Tyron Woodley fight where he gets like a dominant full mount position, but he really doesn't want to risk losing it. So he just stays with his hips very tight and doesn't really posture up. Should be an interesting main event. A couple more wins and Usman has his name right up there with GSP in the welterweight records. So we'll see what happens there and I'll be willing to break it down. I think Usman's game is just so safe and hard to beat, short of like a Hail Mary submission or knockout, that even though Burns has those two facets, I don't think he has them in at a high enough level where it's likely he's going to pull them off. And I think Usman just is one of those fighters where fear makes him better. We saw that, or fear adds to his game. We saw that in the Masvidal fight. He knew how much of a threat Masvidal was in the cage and just didn't give him a second of breathing room. I think the knowledge of what Burns could do is going to motivate Usman to be that much more safe and dominant. And that's what we're going to see. I'm excited for this whole card though. So moving on to the co-main event, Maycee Barber making her return to the octagon after a 1-year layoff. You don't know that name yet, eh? Well, you might in a few, because this girl has the confidence that if she makes it to the top, people are going to look at her run and go, wow. And that was the story a year ago. The UFC kind of set her up with a layup, to be honest. Do you remember the name Roxanne Modafferi?
No.
Okay. She fought a couple weeks ago. I wasn't sure. Yeah, I mean, that seemed like a layup fight for Maycee Barber, taking on a higher ranked opponent who had no striking game to speak of. And I mean, Maycee was on a great TKO knockout run through the women's division to that point, and then the experience of Roxanne let her put on what might have been the biggest feather in her cap win. Just the judo let her take it to the ground, and then she showed some excellent top pressure and had a dominant victory, although Macy injured her leg in that fight, which has kept her out this whole year. So I'm really curious what Macy 2.0 looks like, having had that year layoff. She's just as confident now as she was before, which that confidence is a strength. It is a weapon. Like, that self-belief lets you overcome a lot of bad situations and lets you put yourself in a lot of dominant situations without even having to get into those bad situations. The best defense is a good offense. But she's fighting a similarly experienced opponent, and that experience comes at a higher level than where most of Roxy's has. Alexa Grasso has been a longtime UFC staple, who's a striker, not a grappler. So similar to Modafferi in the experience, different in the style. It's interesting because you'd think Grasso would be talking about the grappling or thinking about the grappling, but the one who's done most of the speaking about winning the fight through grappling has been Macy. So I'm not sure if she's going to come out like she has in her previous fights, just walking forward with that pressure. She's got power in her hands and great timing to land it, but she's going to be trying to do so against the best striker she's had to go up against thus far in her career. She's obviously spoken about working on her wrestling, so you need that well-roundedness, especially in the flyweight division, with the champ being Valentina Shevchenko. If Macy can overcome Grasso, I think that puts her right ahead of where she was before that Modafferi fight, and she's already talking about, like, then I want to fight Calderwood, then I want to fight for the belt. I don't know about that. I don't know about a win over Calderwood earning a UFC title shot, but it again speaks to the confidence that Barber has and eyes on the top. We've seen that work out very well for some fighters, Conor McGregor, Israel Adesanya, and we've seen that work out very terribly for so many fighters I can't name. So we'll see what's in the future for Macy Barber, and we'll see what going up against like some real UFC talent is, because Grasso's probably as good as anyone is in that division, and the move to flyweight, I think moving up a weight class probably benefits female fighters even more than male fighters because the weight cut's that much harder for them. Grasso looked great in her flyweight debut. She had a striking clinic years back against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. If she can survive and weather the early pressure, make her reads on the timing, find her range, I think it could be a long and frustrating night for Macy Barber, but I was on the hype train. Modafferi made it look so easy that it was like, let me jump right off that. But I'm still waiting at the station and willing to jump right back on board with an opponent like Alexa Grasso lined up for Macy Barber, because it's a dig and a compliment when I say Grasso is as good as anyone in this division. If Macy Barber can get a win over her, then I'd pretty comfortably pick her over anyone not named Jessica Andrade or Valentina Shevchenko at flyweight. So really interesting co-main event. Looking forward to it. Next fight on the card is Kelvin Gastelum versus Ian Henisch. Gastelum is one of those fighters who revisionist history is currently not kind to at all. I mean, he was less than 48 hours away from stepping into the octagon to compete for an undisputed UFC championship. And since then, he's on a 3-fight skid, and we're looking back in his record and saying, wow, This guy doesn't have any wins over top 15 opponents who are younger than 35 years old, give or take. I didn't research that roughly, but like Vitor Belfort, Michael Bisping coming off that St. Pierre loss, the wins Gastelum has put together he hasn't gotten any wins over those fighters in their prime. And when he has gone up against fighters in their prime, Israel Adesanya, Darren Till, who did Marvin Vettori? Jack Hermansson. He's struggled, and he's kind of, the performances have gotten worse in that order. I mean, he was 1 round away from beating Israel Adesanya for the UFC interim championship, and he had a lot of great moments. He probably put Adesanya in the most danger anyone's put him in the octagon. But then I think Darren Till put on a perfect game plan on how to neutralize Kelvin Gastelum, and I'm really curious to see how Ian Henisch is gonna fight with that game plan having been put on display. Keep him at range. Don't let him close the distance, because those hooks, that power left hook is his biggest weapon. As he circles into your power side, hit him with that southpaw power kick, take away some of the power, and every time he explodes, every time he tries to get in hook range, clinch him up to take away the power and not let him land that hook. Till did that in a very nervous state, but he did it fairly exemplarily, even if it was not a crazy high-paced performance. And then Jack Hermansson, just with his fantastic jiu-jitsu game, went right after that heel hook and took him out in no time. But Henisch, I don't know if he's as well situated to put on that Till game plan, because he's a pressure fighter. He kind of live by the sword, die by the sword type fighter. He wins his fights by going forward and landing and making the other opponent wilt. And that's worked out amazing for him. For example, in his last fight with that like 1 minute knockout against Gerald Meerschaert, and it's worked out not so great for him in the Derek Brunson fight, where he got that early knockdown but just kind of blew his load looking for the finish, and then had to deal with a very cardio friendly fighter in Derek Brunson. Against Gastelum, cardio is never like a strong suit, but never really an issue. I mean, he went 5 rounds with Adesanya and looked fine up to the 5th round. So 3 rounds, you're not really worried about it. He's got so much power in his hands that he doesn't have to throw that many to get the respect. He can kind of dictate the fight at his pace and be a threat without like having to throw at a pace that's going to gas him. So he doesn't have Max Holloway cardio, but he's usually fine over 3 rounds. So I'm really curious, does Henisch try and drag him into a firefight and make him throw more than he normally likes to, make him tired and make him be the first guy to wilt? Does he try and implement that Darren Till game plan? Is he going to fight at southpaw, fight at orthodox? Because that left power hook of Gastelum is going to land easier if Henisch comes out orthodox, but he's probably more comfortable orthodox. He does have a wrestling background, so I think the biggest takeaway from the Till game plan should be to utilize that clinch every time it gets close. It just was so effective at taking away Gastelum's most dangerous weapon. And then last off is the mental game for both fighters. I mean, Gastelum on a 3-fight slide, each opponent kind of less at the top than the last. So each loss in his way looking worse than the last, although I guess that's debatable where you rank Hermansson and Till. And for Henisch, he had a great run, got into the top 15, and then wilted against Derek Brunson and Omar Yakhmedov. He got his taste of the top. He wasn't quite there. Impressive win over Gerald Meerschaert, who I think is a highly underrated fighter, probably more so these days with that 2020 losses against both Henisch and Khamzat Chimaev. But what is that taste of going up against prime top 15 fighters and being turned back going to add to his game? What adjustments, what wrinkles, what mental work has he added? I'm really fascinated to see. Again, this is an awesome third fight on the card. Next fight, I'll highlight it. It's, I think, a pretty straightforward one to break down. Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Two long time UFC vets. I'm pretty excited for this fight. The UFC vet fights have been great lately. Alex Morano versus Anthony Pettis going a few weeks back, and then last week we had Clay Guida versus Michael Johnson. This fight probably very similar to Clay Guida, Michael Johnson, in that both fighter has their domain they want this fight to happen in. For Jim Miller, that's going to be on the ground. You look at his record, and he's won all the fights he's won by submission. All the fights he hasn't gotten a submission, he was lost. Some of those decisions have been close, most notably the Scott Holtzman one. Bobby Green, excellent striker with a wrestling background. You just want this fight where your game is stronger and your opponent game is weaker. And for Bobby Green, that's in the middle. For Jim Miller, that's on the mat. But the nice thing about them both being UFC vets is they both have good games in their weaker area. They don't want the fight to happen there, but they can certainly make it a fight in either of those places. Jim Miller wants this to go to the mat. He wants to be looking for submission and winning rounds on top, but it's not like he's helpless on the feet. And Bobby Green, I mean, if you're a UFC striker and you've been around long enough, you're gonna have had plenty of guys try and take you down before. I'm pretty sure Green comes from a wrestling background. So just how is Jim Miller gonna fare on the feet to set up his takedowns and make Bobby Green have lots to think about to disguise them? And how is Bobby Green's takedown defense going to hold up? Like I said, I think if this fight goes to the mat, Miller takes it, and if it stays on the floor, Bobby Green takes it. So should be a good one. The next fight I want to talk about, Ricky Simón making a pretty quick turnaround to the octagon. I feel like he fought not 2 weeks ago against Brian Kelleher. This fight been scheduled a couple times. It's going to be happening at featherweight since Simón just made the quick turnaround. He didn't want to cut weight, and Kelleher was happy to oblige him on that. Simón, a really excellent pressure wrestling style, just Habib-esque in his ability to grind on you, break you down, and make you make a mistake and capitalize on it. Kelleher, a little more well-rounded, almost similar to the main event in that it's going to be a wrestler against a guy with some submission game and some knockout power. Nickname Boom Boom for Baldy Ed. He's got some crisp, sharp hands when he wants to land them, or when he can land them. And he's also got a fantastic guillotine that he's won several fights by. And that's going to be a double-edged weapon for him. If he is too confident in it, because he had 2 guillotine wins in 2020, if he just goes for it the first chance, he's probably going to burn his arms out. And Simón's going to be happy to play possum for 60 seconds and then just take advantage of the gassed opponent, which his style is very well suited for. But if Simón takes a bad shot, if he's a little too careless going in and he does give Kelleher the right angle, that's going to be really dangerous for him. But if I'm Kelleher, I'm using the guillotine as a thing to show, to threaten with, and to set up some scrambles and get-ups if it does go to the cage or onto the mat. Kelleher talked about wanting to knock Simón out. I think this fight does go better for him on the feet, and just the judges, if the guy's trying to take you down and you can deny those takedowns, then even if the striking is close, the judges seem to favor that, which I have mixed feelings about. but yeah, this is kind of a underrated fight, I think, between two bantamweights who, I don't know if Simone has a number next to his name again or not, but it just speaks to the depth of that division. For Simone, he gets this win and he's probably got, I mean, for both fighters, they've probably got a solid top 15 opponent next. For Simone, it's just a matter of continuing to pile up the wins. He had his setbacks, but he's looking like he could be a top prospect in this division. For Kelleher, he's had his chances at some high level guys, John Lineker, Montel Jackson, Cody Stamen, hasn't been able to get it done. So I'm just another chance at that to turn a corner in his game and really start taking on the top of the division. Should be a fantastic fight. The last fight I wanted to talk about and break down is my girl, Jillian Robertson, the Canadian, taking on Miranda Maverick. Quick turnaround for Robertson after that December loss to Talia Santos. Miranda Maverick has one fight in the UFC, which she won by doctor's stoppage via cut. And I can't really be impartial for this breakdown, so I'm not even going to try. For Robertson, it's a matter of continuing to round out her game, to not get away from her strongest part, but to make other parts of her game able to complement that rather than hold her back. And for her, that's going to be the takedowns and the striking. The grappling is so phenomenal for her. She's one of my favorite female fighters for just her relentlessness and for her willingness to always go for it. I think she's leading the women's flyweight in submissions, but because she just doesn't settle for position, she's always hunting for that finish, and so able and capable once she gets on top to do that. The problem is the ability to get to that position, and that really held her back in her last fight. She just didn't want to be striking with Santos, so she had to go for shots right away, and that just put her in poor positions. Maverick, interesting, similarly well-rounded to Santos, but I think at lower levels in all facets. I mean, she showed great Muay Thai to get that doctor stoppage TKO win. A lot of her earlier fights in Invicta came from submission, so she can grapple, she can strike, but sometimes the jack of all trades loses in the area where the opponent is strongest, and that's all you've got to do. Make this fight happen in your best. So I kind of expect Robertson to continue to just go right for that grappling, set it up right away, and then just find a way to make it happen once it's on the mat. I mean, she's training with Dean Thomas and one other fighter who he gives all his attention to. So I'm just waiting to see the game continue to improve and enjoying watching the rise, even the improvements we've seen so far. I do love the attitude, which is just, I'm always training. I'm never the fights aren't about like taking the game to the next level. The fights are milestone to show where the game is at, and she just tries to get in there as much as the UFC will let her and get that octagon experience, and then back to the camp to continue working to improve. So excited to see what the last 2 months have brought for her. All right, that wraps up the fights I'm going to break down for UFC 258. Shout outs to a couple other fights on the card: Julian Marquez versus Maki Pitolo, the main card opener; Diego Lima versus Bilal Muhammad, two excellent welterweights; and Andre Ewell versus Chris Guertiez, two fighters in that deep bantamweight division I mentioned earlier. Those are all fantastic fights as well. This goes on too long and there's only so many fights I can break down, but all in all, it's a really excellent card. I'm right from Jillian Robertson's fight to the main event. I intend to watch it all and I cannot wait. In other combat news, Bellator recently announced its light heavyweight tournament Grand Prix. Bellator, as kind of the second biggest MMA promotion, always trying to find its mark, and tournaments have been one of the ways it's tried to differentiate itself, which they haven't had that signature marquee tournament, though they've had their moments. I think their heavyweight tournament was probably the most interesting, and this one has some parallels to it in that they both had a lot of former UFC fights, so the MMA fans get to watch guys they know, even if they're not all too familiar with Bellator as a promotion. And yeah, you look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these guys are former UFC vets, some having been in Bellator longer than others. 3 will be making their Bellator debut. Ryan Bader, Lyoto Machida, Corey Anderson, Phil Davis, Anthony Johnson, and Yoel Romero being the UFC vets. Also in this tournament, Vadim Nemkov, who is the reigning light heavyweight champion and will be defending his title throughout this tournament. Ryan Bader, I don't really know how the heavyweight picture at Bellator is. He is still technically the champ. I guess there's just no real contender, so he can sign up for 3 fights in a row. The fights right now are scheduled to take place April, July, and October. The marquee fight on this tournament is they're not taking any risks. They're putting Yoel Romero and Anthony Rumble Johnson right up against each other right away. Should be interesting to see Yoel Romero at light heavyweight. Less weight cutting might translate to a little more cardio, because he normally has to throw. He's been fighting at a pace where he throws like 5 strikes around. I guess it also depends on how his opponent comes out against him. Anthony Johnson making his long-awaited return to mixed martial arts, cutting down to light heavyweight. There was a lot of speculation that he'd be at heavyweight, but still willing to get down. Vadim Nemkov looking like one of Bellator's better homegrown prospects. That win against Bader being kind of a coming out one, his biggest win to date. Phil Davis, very consistent fighter throughout his career. Bader versus Machida should be interesting to see where Bader's at. He was riding a lot of hype until that Nemkov loss, so trying to see him to get back. Machida, similar to Davis, you kind of know what you're going to get at this point in his career. That one probably won't be a barn burner. And Anderson switching to Bellator, looking to make a little more money, have a little less pressure on his shoulders. As we get to the semis and the finals, depending how the quarters go, this could be a really fascinating one. When we get into April, I'll do a little more specific breakdowns for it, but just wanted to highlight it, put it on the radar, because it is one of Bellator's more eyebrow-raising events. All right, that wraps up this episode's Combat Corner. Looking forward to the UFC fights this weekend. We'll be right back to talk some basketball. And we're back. Owen, we had some NBA action and some G League action going on in the basketball world this weekend. Walk me through it.
Yes, we will get to the Gubble, which has returned. But for now, we will start in the major of the 2 leagues. Kicking it off with some trade news, because we haven't had that much besides the James Harden trade, and I think people are a little bit desperate for players to be on the move. I think teams are trying to avoid moving players around too much given the times that we live in, and there's going to be a couple of these smaller deals. I don't know if anything too major will happen after the James Harden deal, of course, and with the trade deadline still being a ways away, this is a good little teaser for what may come in the coming weeks. But we have Derrick Rose moving from the Detroit Pistons to the New York Knicks in exchange for Dennis Smith Jr., who has been very, very disappointing based on some of the projections and hype that people had for him coming out of college into the draft. Very explosive point guard who, as we saw in the dunk contest, can fly high and get up there. And people had a little bit higher expectations than what has happened. And if you're the Knicks, that's not a terrible player to give up in exchange for Derrick Rose, who's gonna either come off the bench, which he's done so far this week, and give you some microwave scoring and a little bit of playmaking for that second unit, or he could end up starting for them if they feel like Elfrid Payton is not the guy they want to stick with for the rest of the season. But I think Knicks fans, they look at that trade and they worry about Emmanuel Quickley's minutes, who's been a really, really solid player for them as a rookie that they drafted late in the first round. And he's been really inconsistent, but he has shown flashes of being a really, really key kind of leader of the bench unit. And he's been shooting well, not particularly consistently, but he's been playing well overall. And Knicks fans, obviously, in this year, you're trying to see what you have in your young players and who you want your core to be moving forward. They've missed out on having some top picks due to poor lottery odds the last couple of years, but they still have RJ Barrett. They still have Mitchell Robinson. They've still got Quickley now. They had Obi Toppin in last year's draft. So they do really want to see Tom Thibodeau, who is known for wanting to win games. Doesn't matter what team he's coaching. They do want to see him give some of those younger guys the minutes to see what they have. And so they worry about Derrick Rose stealing minutes there. I don't think it'll be too much of an issue because these two complement each other well. Quickley is a distributor and has a nice floater game and seems a little bit less aimed towards scoring the basketball like Derrick Rose is. And I think you can play these guys at the same time. We'll see what Thibodeau decides to do, but I don't expect it being too much of an issue as long as Quickley's still averaging around 20 minutes a night. There shouldn't be a problem. And for the Knicks, that just gives them a little bit more scoring pop. They've been a pretty solid defensive team and have given a lot of effort, but have struggled to score. And that's why they've been falling down the standings. So it's a low risk move to get a little bit more scoring pop off the bench. And I think that's a solid move for them. And it looks like the GMs now are finally figuring out what they want to do and what their vision is. And if you're New York, you just got to be praying and hoping that this trend continues with smart management, because it's been so long since they've had any. And it's such a sleeping monster of a fan base. It's like could probably the second largest fan base in the league and drives a ton of revenue for the league. So if the Knicks can make their way back up into relevance, then that would be really, really important for the league as a whole and its success.
Yeah, it's so strange to hear about that because they've just never been a contender or a threat in our lifetime.
Yeah, they had the year with Melo where they went kind of first round, second round. Yeah, we're waiting for that Knicks team that's special, like the '90s Knicks, and we might have to wait a couple more years before that, but they're on the right track. Moving on, I wanted to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans again because they had been on a little 4-game winning streak before their loss a couple nights ago, but two games ago, Josh Hart had 20 points, 17 rebounds off the bench, which is like a crazy stat line. He's a guy who comes in and does a little bit of everything for them. But the person I want to talk about the most is Zion and what the changes have been recently and why that's leading to a little bit more of Pelican success. They did lose to the Chicago Bulls, which was a tough loss, but we are seeing signs of them starting to figure things out on both ends of the floor. Zion's giving a little bit more effort defensively, but specifically I want to touch on the adjustment that they've made on the offensive side. Zion traditionally, at least in the NBA, has been given a lot of post touches, and that was not what he ever was at Duke or in high school. He grew up with a lot with the ball in his hands and was forced to do a lot of playmaking. And I think you can start to see the Pelicans making that adjustment. Zion's been running a lot more pick and roll with smaller guards setting the screen, which is just a frightening thing for opposing defenses because if you switch that, Zion's going to kill whoever is guarding him with his strength and quickness. Like, even if you're the quickest guard in the league, it's still tough to stay in front of this guy. Like, he's just got such an explosive first step. And so, or you pick your poison and you don't switch it, but then you've got a guard kind of hedging Zion, which, yeah, it's just, he can kind of dominate that big on small matchup really effectively. And he's been making simple passes out of the pick and roll, which have led to some open shots for the Pelicans. And that's why I think you've seen their offensive efficiency go up a little bit. But yeah, he's taking a step forward. You'd like to see him take that next step and start to even see the pick and roll and the rotations at an even higher level, because he's not there yet, but definitely encouraging signs for him. You still think, like, he missed 2/3 of the season last year. He's now only played about 60 games total, so not even a full NBA season, and he's producing the way that he is right now. He may just get into the All-Star game due to his popularity and get enough votes. We might do our All-Stars on Monday. We'll see how we're feeling about that then. I don't know if he's an all-star. He is special enough and popular enough to be one, but we'll see how that goes. And just got to keep it. People have a lot of expectations for him on his second season, but he's truly still working through his rookie 82 game stretch of games that he's playing in the NBA. So nice to see a step forward from him. All right. Not much more in terms of other teams around the league. I'm going to get to the Raptors because those are the games that I watched this week. I noticed that the Heat are starting to make their run. They're fully healthy now. Butler's back and he's playing well, and Bam's been an all-star this season, and they are starting to turn it on, and they've been on a little streak now. They're half a game back of the Raptors, and now they're in a playoff spot. So Miami Heat fans, you can breathe a little bit sigh of relief. Obviously, you want to get out of those play-in seeds, but as it stands right now, they were pretty far back in the standings, and now with this little run, they've created a little bit of a opportunity for themselves to jump into the top 6 seeds. So look out for Miami, because they're on the rise, and they're definitely going to be competing for that kind of 4, 5, 6 seed as the season moves along.
There's a couple just universal truths everyone knows and everyone always forgets. When you take edibles, don't take any more until it's been 2 hours. When Moses goes up the mountain, don't start worshiping a golden calf, and don't make your picks on the season and then immediately jump away from them after 1/3. It's nice to see that when you pick the teams that you think are going to do well over a good stretch of games, the more that stretch plays out, the closer to truth, closer return to average gets. And I think that's what we're starting to see as the season progresses.
Definitely. All right, let's talk some Raps. They had 3 games in 4 nights up until last night, Thursday night, when they lost to the Boston Celtics. But the previous 2 games were solid wins, especially Monday night. Really tough win. Nick Nurse, frustrated about a foul call, gets kicked out of the game. Lowry leaves with back spasms. Still no OG at all this week. And the Raps, they just absolutely clamped up the Grizzlies defensively in crunch time and were able to make some big shots. And that was a really key signature win for them on the season. They move on and basically dominate the Wizards, who refuse to play defense at all, and very disappointing. I finally got to see a full game of Russell Westbrook this season, and I was very underwhelmed. He has a couple moments where he explodes for layups, but he's settling for a lot of jump shots. He's complaining to the refs about calls every other play, and obviously Lowry does it too. But Westbrook it just seems more depressing, where he's looking for it as a way out rather than just a dialogue that he creates the whole game to try and get a couple extra foul calls like Lowry does. Yeah, it's really disappointing to see how far Westbrook has fallen. You hope that he's still probably dealing with a little bit of an injury, so that way you can come up with an excuse for why he may bounce back. But yeah, I feel bad for Bradley Beal, who's been putting up insane scoring totals. He didn't have his best game against the Raptors, which is a first because he usually destroys us. But Yeah, I feel bad for him. He'll be an all-star this year after getting snubbed last year. And this Wizards team really has to figure out soon what they want to do with Bradley, because obviously they're not going to be contending anytime soon with this roster.
I saw some quote this week about like gravity is just not on our side. Like maybe if we're standing on the moon, these shots would go in or something. Like it must just be so frustrating.
Yeah, Bradley's been creating some open shots for others because he's getting so many people targeting him on the offensive side of the ball, but some of those shots aren't falling for their role players, which is making it even more frustrating for him. But the biggest thing with the Wizards is they just don't play defense at all. They really don't. They have Alex Len starting now, who we cut, which says something. And he actually was okay in this game. And yeah, it wasn't too bad, but yeah, they need someone to play defense because Boucher just absolutely postered the rookie Denny Avdia. That was an epic dunk, 2 hands with contact. Probably should have been an and one. That was kind of the epitome of that game on Wednesday. And then the Raps go back to back. Not an excuse because Boston was coming off a long West road trip, and that first game back is usually tough for that team. But the Raptors, they did a really good job containing Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum in this game. It was just Semi Ojeleye, Peyton Pritchard, Kemba Walker in the end, spread out along like 5 or 6 bench guys. The Boston Celtics added up to about like 50 to 60 bench points. And that was what killed the Raptors, is the Celtics just wouldn't seem to miss a wide open 3 coming off of either like a double team off a guy in the post or an offensive rebound, something like that. The role players were big in this one and hit open shots. And on the other side, the Raptors just, they would go on a run, bring it to 5, and then give up 2 threes on back-to-back possessions and be back to trailing by 11. So a tough one. There was a stretch in the third quarter that I watched where both teams went 3.5 minutes without scoring. It was like the sloppiest, just most bizarre. I think Norm missed a wide open layup and Pascal missed a layup and Tatum missed a floater from in tight and Tristan Thompson got blocked a couple times. It was just a bizarre 3-minute stretch where no one could score. And in the end, it was Grant Williams breaking the drought with like a 10-foot push shot, which just, of course, like Grant Williams was the one who broke the run. And that was kind of the defining point for the Raptors. They had enough stops in that game to make it close and then couldn't convert. And then one random Semi Ojeleye 3 was a dagger. So frustrating result because they kind of needed that one if they were going to really establish themselves as a contender among the top teams in the East, because they've been beating the bad teams, but have yet to really have a signature win against one of the top teams. Even that Brooklyn Nets win, they didn't have Kevin Durant, and the Nets have been sliding recently without Durant. So it doesn't seem like that much of an accomplishment. We kind of need the Raptors to come out and get a signature win against one of these top East or West teams before you can really start to take them seriously. Okay. Now we are done with the NBA, and I'm going to talk some G League because the G League bubble kicked off on Wednesday. I was super, super excited to watch the G League as a whole, but more specifically this G League Ignite team, which this is their first year established. This team has signed a couple of high school graduates who decided not to go to college and instead go straight to the G League, play a year professionally, and then be eligible for the NBA draft. This is the first year that they're experimenting with it. It's really interesting because this might open the door for more top high school recruits to skip college, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing if you know for sure you're probably going to go to the NBA. And we've got 2 top 10 picks on this Ignite team in Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga, and then another draft hopeful in Dacian Nix and Isaiah Todd. And yeah, this team I was really excited to watch because it's a mix of these kind of top 4 prospects and then quite a few old guys. We got Raptors longtime player Amir Johnson, if anyone remembers that name. He was on the team for a while and just like a classic veteran presence. And I was really excited to watch this, and it was great. It was on at 11 a.m. They kicked off the game, and so I was able to watch them play against the Santa Cruz Warriors. And the G League bubble is going to go for about a month of regular season games. I think they're playing 25 games or 15 games in 25 days, and then they'll go top 8 teams out of the 18 teams in the league go straight into the playoffs. So a lot of reps. I know on Saturday, so that's tomorrow, the G League Ignite will go up against Raptors 905, Malachi Flynn, Jalen Harris, Elise Johnson. We'll get to see some of their play against these top rookies. But I want to talk about this game, so I'll get right into it. Jalen Green is the top 3 projected pick coming out into this draft. He has been comped to like a Paul George. He's been comped to other kind of wings that maybe aren't the tallest wings, but are in that kind of average setting and create their own shot. He's a fantastic shooter from outside. He's got a great mid-range game, and you can tell he's going to be great at slashing as well, because he had a couple plays where he could hang in the air and attack the rim. He's a little bit skinnier than your traditional like defensive stopper, so he's going to look to be a little bit more like a scorer. And he struggled in this game. And I think it was because it's his first professional basketball game, which makes sense. He's facing grown men now, not the high schoolers that he played against almost a year ago. There is a lot of pressure on him to come out and perform, and his game is a little bit more tailored to finding the nuances and creating his own shot. And for a first professional game, that's normally not going to go well. The more impressive player in this game for me was Jonathan Kuminga. He was fantastic. He's going to rocket up draft boards because of his body type. We saw in the draft this year, Patrick Williams, who was a bench player at Florida State, went all the way up to number 4 on Chicago because people saw that body type he has is just so well suited to guard kind of the best players in the league at the wing position. But he also has shown a little bit of offensive game, and people just love how that body type guys can really grow into it rather than being slimmer and having to bulk up. He's already got that foundation for strength, and if he's got that lateral quickness too, it's got a great package. And Jonathan Kuminga has a similar body type, and he was flying all over the place. He was spinning out of the post. He was attacking guys. He had this incredible 40-foot bounce pass to Jalen Green, who two-handed windmilled it to avoid the block. Like, that was the signature play. I retweeted it. I posted on my Instagram. It was fantastic. That was like, this is the future right here in one play. And he seals the game, G League Ignite up 3, and he rises up and meets Jordan Poole at the rim and just swats his shot away and stares him down to end the game. There's 3 seconds left, and this kid came in and he's got a ton of confidence. And there was a viral video going around with them in warmups, and he absolutely posterized the guy on his own team. Like, this Kuminga kid is just oozing with athleticism. And at his body type, I think he's going to move up the draft boards because he's showing confidence in his first professional game going right at guys. So really exciting to watch him moving forward. The other kind of prospect that stood out in this game for me was Daishen Nix. He came off the bench and gave some great minutes for G League Ignite. He has another interesting body type. He's like super thick for a point guard, and he's got great hair. And he comes off the bench, and he's got a little bit of nuance too. His first bucket was like, he went right at the center, hung in the air, adjusted, and made a tough layup. And he had a couple plays where he'd be in the pick and roll. He'd have this herky-jerky motion, stop, bump into the guy, attempt the shot, try and draw a foul, stuff like that. And at his size, if he's got moves like that, I think he's going to be a solid prospect, could project to be a starting point guard on a team at a certain point because of his size and ability to see over defenses, but also attack the rim, finish through contact, generate contact in the pick and roll, and find open shooters. So I liked what I saw from him, and it's going to be interesting to see. This is their very first professional game. They've got at least 14 more left. I'd like to see them in the playoffs. That'd be really fun to see them in the G League playoffs. Who knows what's going to happen? I didn't expect them to win a ton of games, but they came out and beat Santa Cruz Warriors in their first one, so that's a big start for them. and fun to watch these prospects. I briefly want to touch on the team's kind of setup. They've got kind of three vets in particular that I want to talk about was Amir Johnson, Jarrett Jack, and Bobby Brown. They've all been around for a while. They've all played at varying degrees, NBA, G League for a number of years. And it seems like those guys are great veteran presence. They're going to teach these guys how to be professional, how to operate. Obviously, this bubble is a new scenario for most of these guys because they weren't in the NBA bubble. So it's going to just be about maintaining that mindset and going to work every day. And I think like Amir Johnson, especially, he was beloved in Toronto. I think he's just a great, great, great guy to have around these kids to teach them how to be the best players and people they can be. And I'm hoping this G League Ignite experiment works because it would be great to see some of these polished high school kids skip college and come right to a professional league. And we've seen it be successful for LaMelo last year, who played in Lithuania and then in Australia, and a couple other kids who have skipped out on college to go professional. And like, it's just a different thing when you're playing against grown men who are fighting for opportunities to make it back to the NBA or make it back to the Euro League. It's a little bit different than college. And so it will be interesting to watch the dynamic of this team. I think those veteran presences are really important because late in this fourth quarter, the Ignite went to Jarrett Jack down the stretch, and he was lights out. He didn't really miss. He had the game winning mid-range jumper to put them up 3. Kind of acted as the dagger with the Kuminga block, and so cool to see from them. I also wanted to shout out Jeremy Lin, who is playing for the Santa Cruz Warriors on the other side. He played hard. He played really hard. He had some great defensive stops against Jalen Green. He stripped him once. He made a couple tough layups in traffic. He took, I think, about 3 like hard charges on back-to-back possessions at one point in the third quarter, and was just kept being helped off the floor by his teammates, and he looked like he was in pain, but he was putting his body out on the line, and he really wants to come back to the NBA. And who knows, this is a great opportunity in the Gubble for guys to get that opportunity to show what they're worth and make their way back to the association.
It's nice timing then. If it's like a month-long bubble, then playoffs, that'll kind of wrap up right towards the end of the NBA season, and the teams will have an opportunity to, like, maybe their ranks are a bit depleted. They're looking for one extra spark, one thing to try right before the playoffs, or just one more weapon. So I like the timing of that.
Yeah, exactly. It is great. All right. Last thing about the Gubble I want to talk about is I forgot that they were doing this, and then I heard it on the broadcast, is the G League is the developmental league, right? But it's not just developmental for the players. It's developmental for the refs. It's developmental for the rules, for the things that they want to change in the game of basketball as a whole. And it's a very experimental zone for the NBA. And so you've got referees who are getting kind of their first reps in professional basketball games. And the things I want to talk about are the rules. So in the G League, 1 free throw for 2 points. They don't do 2 free throws. It's 1 shot, and you either get the full 2 or not. They're experimenting with that. That might help speed up the pace of play. It's 1 shot for 2 points until the last 2 minutes of the game when it goes 2 shots. So they're experimenting with that. And the other thing they're experimenting with that I saw in this game was a reset timeout. So essentially, late game, you have your normal amount of timeouts, but you have 1 extra timeout that you can use to advance the ball. You get 14 seconds on the clock. You advance the ball to half court, no timeout. So you don't get to huddle. But so it's basically, if you have no timeouts left and a team makes that free throw, you're in the fouling stage and trying to catch up, you can call that reset timeout. Move the ball up to half court. You got 14 seconds on the shot clock and no timeout. So it's essentially just an extra timeout, but you don't huddle up, which I thought was really interesting. And Santa Cruz ended up using it for their last possession. In the end, Jordan Poole gets blocked, but I thought it was really interesting to see the refs kind of hurrying them up the court because they may be trying to talk about what they want to do. So it'll be interesting. I think coaches will just give a couple of plays in if they call a full timeout and say, if we have to call this reset, this is what we're running out of it. But another interesting little thing that the NBA is experimenting with in the G League, and there'll be couple of other rule changes that we may see them experiment with. So interesting to see that moving forward, and if that might come to the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, speaking when you have like a casual fan watch a basketball game with you, the thing they comment on often is like the pace is kind of brutal, like of the last quarter of any game. I mean, it's strange because so much of the game it feels like there's so much action that there's almost no action, and then the last bit can just be really rough to stay on your toes for. And I find that myself even less casual fan. I mean, maybe just too spoiled by hockey. It doesn't bug me quite as much in football because knowing with 3 timeouts, but the when you get like 6 timeouts called in like a 8-minute of game clock span, it can be kind of rough. So I'm happy to advocate for a little experimentation to improve that flow a little.
Absolutely. So the G League Ignite, they play today at 3 p.m., probably around the time when this podcast will have been out, probably for a couple hours. And then they play the Raptors 9:05 tomorrow at 7 p.m., which is right in the heart of all the other sports. So don't know if I'll catch too much of it, but definitely something to follow. And I had missed out talking about my college prospects recently because of just the chaoticness of other sports kicking off. And so this is an opportunity to look at some of the other prospects besides the regulars that I had been talking about in previous pods. So looking forward to that. We'll take a quick break and come back for some talking hockey. And we're back for some talking hockey, more specifically the North Division and a couple of other storylines south of the border. But we will start with our lovely Toronto Maple Leafs, who continue to roll in the top of the North. Give it to me.
Yeah, I mean, back-to-back 2 wins in our last 2 games. Monday night against the Canucks and Wednesday night against the Habs. And neither game looking particularly spectacular, but 2 points is 2 points as they continue to roll along.
8-1-1 in their last 10, have won 4 in a row. And even more importantly, they're winning these games in regulation and not giving teams a chance to pick up loser points as they attempt to catch up in the standings. So the Vancouver game was like a game that we probably should have lost, and had a quick moment of excitement with the back-to-back goals, and the third line has really started to show itself a little bit, which is what I've been asking for. But I really just want to talk about this Leafs Habs game because this is the game that everyone has been so excited to watch. The first game of the season was a bit of a circus because obviously it's the first game anyone's played in a really long time. But this game was, both teams had gone out, beat pretty much everyone else in the division. They're the 2 top teams coming back head to head. Toronto versus Montreal, tale as old as time. And I got to say, Montreal gave it to us in the first 2 periods, to be quite blunt. I didn't see much from the Leafs that suggested they were in this. Freddie gave up a gimme to Josh Anderson, but then was pretty solid after that and gave us a chance to win. And up until the kind of third period, I had in my notes here that the first line showed up and not much else. And then things changed, obviously, with 3 first goals of the seasons for 3 different players. Travis Dermott with the loudest wahoo I've ever heard. It's just different when there's no fans in the Bell Center, man. And you could hear that very clearly on the broadcast. He was fired up. Justin Hall with the clap bomb, just straight beating Carey Price. I think everyone was surprised that went in. And then finishing up with Superman, Ilya Mikheyev, within like a minute of the Justin Hall goal. The Leafs generate pressure. Alex Kerfoot misses on his opportunity, but the puck kind of skips over to Mikheyev and he gets just enough of it to put it in. And so I feel bad for my housemates. I was screaming and they probably thought I was dying downstairs, but I was so happy for each of those guys because they, like Justin Hall especially, has been unbelievable so far this season for the Leafs, and so nice to see them get rewarded with their first goals of the season. For McCabe, that's a huge monkey off the back because he's been all around the net, but just hasn't seemed to score. And of course, this is how he's going to do it. So really happy for those guys. And yeah, just a big minute is what it took for the Leafs to get control of the lead, and a team that now has been way more responsible defending. And you feel a little bit safer with the lead than I've ever felt ever in my time as a Leafs fan.
I'm starting to hold my breath a little less going into the third period with those 2-goal leads. I don't know if your broadcast had this, but it was really funny timing on mine. They were discussing that the Leafs only had 4 goals from a defenseman, with the Dermott goal being the 4th, as Hall rips that clap bomb. They're like, I guess that's 5 now. And I mean, the story of the Maple Leafs so far this season has been the big 4. Marner, Matthews, Tavares, and Nylander have been doing as much as they're getting paid to do, and it's been enough to push us to the top. And when the other teams have their team meetings, their analysis before the game, who their book is on. So it means when guys like Dermott, when guys like Hall touch the puck, that the every other team defender, they have to keep their peripheral awareness on, okay, where are the big 4? Are they on the ice? And it just opens up the space that much more. And you love to see the players take advantage of it and take those open shots. Kind of Dermott's goal reminiscent of the first one Spezza had on his hat trick the other night. I loved that 4-on-4 pressure. A lot of the big 4 aforementioned had a huge part in just maintaining that zone pressure that fatigued the Habs defense to get there. And then the Mikheyev goal, similar to the one scored by the third line the other night against Vancouver, just get in the forecheck, get behind the net, and move the puck and crash the net. Good things will happen. I'm almost more excited for Thornton to come back, to see Hyman back on that third line consistently, than to see Thornton on that first line, because I think when Mikheyev and Kerfoot get their game just up to the next level, with both of them scoring goals in the past week, hopefully the confidence helps them get there. And a guy like Hyman, who's just always such a spark, that third line is going to be so deadly coming off. Okay, you guys just had to defend Matthew Marner, Tavares, Nylander. Well, we're just going to go forecheck, punch you out, and if you get the tightest bit sloppy, that sort of play is going to get a puck in the back of the net. It's so great to be cheering for the number 1 team.
Yeah, I will scream this from the rooftops until he is no longer a Leaf, but I love Zach Hyman. He just, the energy he provides is unparalleled. And I his brother went to Western. I'm not sure where he is now, but he was in the same program as me, and I did an assignment with him way back, but I never had a chance to talk to him about his brother. I only really found out that they were related after we had finished the project. I don't know if he would answer my questions, but fun little kind of degrees of friendship there. Yeah, just love Zach Hyman. And if you look at it from the other side, I think Habs Twitter was melting down a little bit during that game on Wednesday, which I'm not going to complain about. Some calling for Carey Price, which is just ridiculous, and those Habs fans probably don't know anything about hockey. The ones calling for Carey Price, I saw them. Yeah, it looks like this Habs teams are starting to figure them out. They've lost 2 in a row. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They just, like, another loss last night to the Oilers where they didn't manage to score a goal. And Philip Deneau has not scored his first goal of the season yet, and he's their top line center. So just it was a team that was doing it by committee very early on in the season and has an identity, which means something. But I think teams are starting to figure out that there's a way that you can play this team where it really reduces their potency on the offensive side because they had been leading the NHL in goals scored, and now they're most definitely not. So yeah, just if you're a Habs fan, you gotta be a little bit concerned because again, really, really great team, really solid, and of course your goaltender is your best player, but I don't know if they can match up when the top four on the Leafs are buzzing. It's just a superior level of top end talent, and that can make a difference in the NHL.
Yeah, even, I mean, Matthews extends his point streak, getting an assist on Hyman's empty netter. But just when those two lines are going to come out and play physical, play strong, try and generate scoring opportunities, it's going to have a fatiguing effect and open up the ice for other players. And I think the book wasn't out on Suzuki and Anderson in particular as like Montreal's top players, and that, as it's one thing to have that hot explosive dark horse start, but then once the book is out, once like, okay, in our team meetings, these are the guys we have to focus on, can you continue to do that? Can you do, as we're talking about with the Leafs, like generate some opportunities for other players? Or is it a matter of making those adjustments? And you see it go back and forth. Like one of my go-to examples for hockey would be Vladimir Tarasenko. Came in, scored 2 goals on his first 2 shots in the NHL, had a huge start, and then teams figured him out. Like he was used to that Russian wide ice. They started checking him a little narrower. They made their counter adjustments, and then he returned to form with some counter adjustments. We speak a lot about team culture. The Habs, hate to say it, they have a great one. So down but not out at the moment for the Habs. I won't be watching it because UFC will be on, but excited for the next one Saturday.
Yeah, the deep, dark inner Leafs fan in me is going, we can say all this great stuff and be so excited, and the Habs will come out and drop 7 on us or something on Saturday night. So fingers crossed that the trends continue to go the way they are going.
My deep, dark inner Leafs fan is saying, yeah, but you're still going to first round playoff exit. But
Okay. Let's move off of this before we get too sad. Other key teams in the North Division, the Flames are now starting to figure things out. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They beat the Jets on Wednesday in Dubois, or on Tuesday in Dubois' debut, and they beat the somber looking Canucks last night. The Canucks have now lost 6 in a row and have really fallen down the table. The Flames are making their way. They're 2 points back of the Jets. They are 3 points back of the Oilers with 3 games in hand. So it's that middle kind of section, Oilers, Jets, Flames, is going to be really fun to watch, especially the Battle of Alberta. You can never turn that down.
yeah, I think they might have killed 2 birds with 1 stone. They're trying out Bennett with Gaudreau and
Monahan.
Yeah. So if that can be a consistent source of offense, then 1, they've figured out that line. They've kind of had a rotating player over the years there, and 2, maybe the Bennett trade talks goes away. So yeah, I'm hoping the Habs drops down and we have a middle 4 to talk about there.
Yeah.
But that is definitely the most competitive stretch in the Canadian division right now.
You look at it right now. If the Jets win their next game, they jump into second on the table. So, yeah, it is competitive. I think between the Jets and the Canadians, and then the Oilers and the Flames are in their kind of third tier there because the Oilers with their games in hand, or the extra games played, and the Flames just having a couple more losses. So, yeah, it's kind of split right now. Leafs, Habs, Jets, Oilers, Flames, which is not a bad separation. For the 4 teams I picked are in those 5, so I'm not going to complain. All right. Different story. Let's go to off the ice and talk about Sportsnet's very own Brian Burke becoming the president of hockey operations for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't know who saw this coming. I certainly didn't. And we had all over Twitter whole I don't know what you want to call it, but everyone's saying goodbye, Brian. We love you. We're gonna miss you. What a teammate. Blah blah blah. Brian Burke's not my favorite person. I appreciated some of the things he said on Hockey Night in Canada, but it'll be interesting to see what he does with the Penguins. He finally gets Sid after 16 years.
Yeah, I enjoyed the variety of the panel. Like I wouldn't enjoy a panel that's just composed of like Brian Burke, Don Cherry, and one or two others, but having one of those voices mixed in there adds a nice flavor. So miss him there. Be interesting. I mean, it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity to serve as management for generational players like Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, who, I mean, down but not out. Can they make one last run? Something's not quite clicking for them. I don't know. See if the old school mentality of Burke alongside Ron Hextall, who formerly was serving with the Flyers, which he helped build them to be the team that they are now. So, I mean, I look at Burke's tenure in management with the Leafs and the Flames, and he helped he he helped turn them from kind of rebuild into like starting the foundations, but it wasn't quite enough. It wasn't quite there. He drafted some good talent, made some interesting trades, but it never quite clicked. I think joining a slightly more competitive, looking to win now franchise in the Penguins. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Mike Sullivan, the former Pens GM, made a like I think record-setting number of trades in like his 2-3 year span. So be interesting to see if they try and match that pace, what they think this team needs. We'll be happy to cover it as soon as there's some trade news or deals out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they'll be looking for that next Kessel or maybe another solid D man to either replace or put with Letang, because I've heard his name in the market.
Yeah, and you've got to think if it doesn't go well quickly, like Malkin Crosby might want out. It's not unthinkable at this point.
Oh, that would be wild.
I can't imagine, but I'd like to see Crosby in the finals once more. So I will support whatever makes that happen,
All right.
except
We
him going to the Canadians.
Yeah. Oh, God. We will move from Pennsylvania to the state of Ohio and the Columbus Blue Jackets with a surprising but not surprising story, as you probably could have called this happening. Definitely not this early along in the tenure, but Patrick Laine getting benched in his earlier games against or on the Blue Jackets, and I don't think it had much to do with Torts, but obviously the benching happens and people point out the similarities of Dubois and of course Laine. I don't know, he just, I guess, has seemed to create friction wherever he goes.
Yeah, I mean, the sun rises in the east. John Tortorella benches another player who happens to be a superstar. A couple different directions you can go with this. We've learned a little more since it happens. It seems Laine was benched for mouthing off to an assistant coach, which lends itself to the friction narrative. Kind of I'd love to have the full story on that. Kind of surprised, like you arrive at this new organization, what mindset are you gonna walk in with? Mouthing off, not a great one. John, but at the time of the benching, they were tied in that game, and it was like, really, you're gonna bench the best goal scorer you have on your roster? But hey, they eke out a win with the other player in the trade, Roslovich, coming up big, and they've since won another. So hard to criticize a winning team. It's I'm curious though, because I think there's a lot of great NHL coaches out there. There's not very many players who can score at Patrick Laine's level. So from a organizational management perspective, you have Tortorella and his peculiar coaching philosophies, which has served the Blue Jackets fairly well over the last 3-4 years, and kind of he's built what the team identity is right now. So are they going to go with that, or are they going to do everything they can to court Laine? And it's going to be dependent on both ends. Like, if Laine's mouthing off already, what is he gonna get a little humbler? Is he gonna buy into Torts' system? And how hard is Torts gonna? I feel stupid asking this. Torts isn't gonna bend. He's not gonna change his mind on a single thing. So it really comes down to, will Laine buy in, or is this just going to be a temporary stop for him?
Yeah. It's Columbus, and that's one of the reasons they've been successful, and you have to have respect for Torts, is that he is unwavering in his treatment no matter who you are. Laine already came out and said that he deserved the benching. Again, we don't know the whole story. We don't know how much he actually believes that himself, but he said it, which at least is a step forward. And yeah, it will be something important to follow as the season goes along, because you only get so many chances in the NHL. And if Laine is going to continue to move on from teams, then at some point you have to realize what the root cause of the problem is. And it's not necessarily the philosophies of the teams you're playing for.
Yeah, I mean, no one is in a hurry to make a trade to pick up D'Angelo off the Rangers at the moment, because in this shortened season with so much pressure and like a locker room that's spending a ton of time together, chemistry is really important. And if you're Laine, even if you're thinking like, okay, I don't want to stick around on this Columbus team for too long, as an RFA, your best way out of Columbus is to put up a season so spectacular that teams are willing to sign you to a contract Columbus just can't match, which I don't know the cap specifics of Columbus or if they'll be able to match anything a la Weber. But yeah, it's in Laine's best interest to get as much ice time as he can, and it's in Columbus's best interest to have the best goal scorer on the ice they can, as that is a asset they're going to be lacking over the stretch of the season, and they're in a really tight division. So they won their last one. Curious to watch Columbus and see how that dynamic unfolds.
Absolutely. It should be an excellent weekend of sports coming up. Not to mention 12 days from now, we lose the NFL, but the MLB pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training in just under 2 weeks. So we will start jumping in on the baseball action in a couple of pods. And I'm just really excited to cover it all with you, buddy. And want to thank everyone for listening once again. We appreciate the support and hope that everyone's enjoying it. Stay safe, stay happy. Max, take it away.
Yeah, to add to that, the new long-term goal of this podcast is work towards that YouTube monetization. We've got about 989 subscribers to go on the YouTube channel before we can start thinking about that. So if you're listening to this through a podcasting network and you've got 30 seconds, I'd appreciate, search on YouTube, Sports Next Door, click subscribe. Happy for people to listen anywhere, whether it's iTunes, Google, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, and through our web player. But would really appreciate the YouTube subscription. And until next time, Sports Next Door signing off.